In the year 1590, a man returned to a small English colony on the coast of the New World, expecting to find his family and more than 100 settlers waiting for him. Instead, he found silence. The houses were gone, the people had vanished, and carved into a wooden post was a single mysterious word that has puzzled the world for over 400 years. More than 100 men, women, and children had disappeared without a trace, leaving almost nothing behind. This is the story of the Lost Colony of Roanoke. In the late 1500s, England was hungry to establish a foothold in the New World, to plant a permanent colony on the vast unknown continent across the Atlantic. In 1587, a group of over 100 English settlers set sail to build that colony. Unlike earlier expeditions of soldiers, these were families, men, women, and children, come to make a home. Their destination was Roanoke Island, off the coast of what is now North Carolina. It was a place of marshes, forests, and shifting sandbanks, beautiful and unforgiving. Leading them was a man named John White, an artist and their appointed governor. He carried the hopes of the entire venture on his shoulders. The colonists arrived and set about building their settlement, raising houses and a defensive enclosure, trying to carve a piece of England out of the American wilderness. But the situation was fragile from the start. Relations with some of the native peoples of the region had been damaged by earlier English expeditions, and mistrust ran deep. Supplies were thin, and the land was harder to tame than they had hoped. It quickly became clear that the young colony could not survive on its own for long. Amid these hardships came a moment of hope. John White's daughter gave birth to a baby girl named Virginia Dare, said to be the first English child born in the New World. She was a symbol of everything the colony was meant to become. A new generation, English by blood, born on American soil. The future, tiny and fragile, cradled in that struggling settlement. But hope could not fill empty stores. The colonists pleaded with White to sail back to England himself, to fetch the supplies and reinforcements they desperately needed. White was reluctant to leave his family and the people in his charge, but they insisted that only he had the standing to secure help. At last, he agreed to go. Before he left, the colonists made a solemn agreement with him. If they were forced to abandon the settlement while he was away, they would leave a message carved where he could find it. They would carve the name of their destination, and crucially, if they left in distress, under attack or in danger, they would carve a cross above the name as a signal of trouble. With that promise in place, John White boarded a ship and sailed back across the Atlantic, expecting to return within months. He could not have imagined how long he would truly be gone. When White reached England, he found a nation at war. England and Spain were locked in a deadly struggle, and every available ship was needed to defend against the Spanish fleet. White was trapped. He could not find passage back to Roanoke. Month after month, and then year after year, the war held him in England, while his family waited across the ocean. He must have been tormented by thoughts of them. His daughter, his infant granddaughter, and the colonists who had trusted him, all stranded on a distant shore with no word from home. It was 3 long years before John White was finally able to secure a voyage back to the New World. 3 years of silence, war, and dread. When at last his ship approached Roanoke Island, it was, by a haunting coincidence, around the time of his granddaughter Virginia's 3rd birthday. White's heart must have been pounding as they neared the shore. He would soon learn the fate of everyone and everything he had left behind. As the ship drew close, they saw smoke rising from the island. Hope flared. It seemed a sign that the colonists were still there, still alive, keeping their fires burning. But when White and his men finally landed and made their way to the settlement, that hope drained away. There was no one to greet them. The place was deserted. The houses had not merely been abandoned. They had been carefully taken apart, dismantled and removed. This was not the chaos of a sudden attack. It looked deliberate, almost orderly. A defensive wall of logs had been built around the site since he left. White searched the silent enclosure, calling out, finding only emptiness where 100 people should have been. And then he saw it. Carved into one of the wooden posts of the palisade were letters, clear and deliberate. A single word, Croatoan. Nearby, on a tree, were carved 3 more letters, C-R-O. The beginning of the same word, perhaps interrupted, perhaps a first attempt. For John White, the word was not meaningless. Croatoan was the name of a nearby island to the south and of the native people who lived there, a people who had been relatively friendly to the English. And there was something just as important in what he did not find. There was no cross carved anywhere, no signal of distress. By their own agreement, the colonists had not left in danger. It seemed then to be a message of hope. The colonists had apparently left of their own accord and gone to Croatoan. All White had to do was sail a short distance south to find them. But the New World was not finished with John White. As his ships prepared to sail for Croatoan Island, a violent storm swept in from the sea. The weather turned savage. His vessels were battered, anchors were lost, and the crews feared for their lives. It became impossible to reach the island where his family might be waiting. Against his will, White was forced to abandon the search. His ship was driven away from the coast, back out into the Atlantic, and ultimately all the way back to England. He never returned. The man who had left to save his colony and who had finally come back to find the single clue to their fate was never able to follow it. And so the colonists of Roanoke passed out of history and into legend, their destination named on a post, but their fate forever unconfirmed. In the centuries since, people have tried again and again to solve the puzzle of that carved word. What really happened to the lost colony? The most hopeful and widely favored theory is the simplest one, that the colonists did exactly what the carving suggested. They left Roanoke and went to live among the friendly people of Croatoan. Perhaps facing starvation and isolation, they abandoned their failing settlement and were taken in by the native community, slowly becoming part of it over the generations. In later years, there were tantalizing hints that seemed to support this. Reports of native people in the region with unusual features, or who spoke of English ancestors, or who lived in surprisingly English ways. If this is true, then the lost colony was never truly lost. It simply dissolved into the land and its people. Its English blood carried on quietly through the generations. Other theories are darker. Some believed the colonists were attacked and killed, either by hostile native groups or by Spanish forces hunting English settlements. But this seemed at odds with the evidence. There was no sign of a battle, no graves, no bodies, no distress cross. A massacre rarely leaves a settlement so tidily dismantled. Still, other ideas suggested the colonists split up, that some went to Croatoan while others tried to move inland or up the coast, scattering their fate across the wilderness. Disease, starvation, and the sheer brutality of frontier life may have finished off whatever group survived, erasing them one by one until nothing remained to be found. Modern archaeology has chased the mystery for decades, digging at Roanoke and at sites connected to Croatoan, searching for English artifacts among native settlements. Some intriguing objects have been unearthed, hints that English colonists may indeed have lived among the native peoples further south. But nothing has yet delivered a final, undeniable answer. And so the fundamental mystery endures. We do not know for certain what became of Virginia Dare, or her mother, or the more than 100 souls who vanished from that island. We know only what they left us. Dismantled homes, an empty enclosure, and a word carved into wood by people who, it seems, chose their own path into the unknown. That single word, Croatoan, is both an answer and a riddle. It points somewhere, and yet it has never quite led anyone all the way to the truth. An entire colony vanished into the American wilderness, leaving behind one carved word and no cross of distress. A message that says, perhaps, do not fear for us, and yet has haunted the world for over 400 years.